This is absolutely perfect. October Red, I'm here with a man who is no stranger to boxing, who's now a commentator, presenter with Matchroom and DAZN. Welcome, first-time guest, but talk to me about this experience in Sheffield today.
Do you know, walking in here was just like me walking into the Lynn Club in South London, where I started and finished as an amateur. And Eddie and Matchroom were there a couple of months ago rescuing the club. That was in a new base. First of all, it was in a place just like this, the ring up against the wall, and see all the bags down there. And we would jump out of the ring and race towards the bags to try and get there first, because there were so many kids in the gym. If you didn't get on the bag, you'd have to wait for rounds and rounds and rounds. And you might see here, right down at the back end as well, there's actually 2 kids on 1 bag. And that's what we had to do. There were so many of us in the gym. But that's the way you learn. And this is just, I can't stop smiling. This is just like going back in time for me.
But this is what we love. It's the emotion and the hope that boxing gives. It puts smiles on faces. As soon as we saw Eddie walk through the door, the faces, talk to us about the faces of the students, how they lit up. They literally jumped on him.
They did, and they were looking up kind of doe-eyed. And first of all, it was, is it him? Is it him? It is him. And then they all sort of dived towards him. And you get the different personalities. There are some that sort of step away, and others just dive in straight away and want to shake his hands. But that's what you get in gyms like this. You get the personalities, and it doesn't necessarily mean that those that run to Eddie and look like they're confident and full of beans, they're not necessarily usually the most confident when it comes actually to boxing. But that's the fascination of being in a place like this. There's so many different characters. And the big difference to when I was a kid is that there are girls in here now. There were no girls boxing when I was first starting boxing. So that's the big difference here. But I mean, look around at the age groups, the shapes, the sizes. This is going on up and down the country. And we've just heard a speech from Eddie saying that this place, in terms of the venue, is in trouble. This spirit ain't in trouble, and somebody's got to save this, you know.
Experience that you'll know, obviously, with what happened with the Lynn, and you were there, stood proud on the doorstep at the reopening. How important is it for boxing in the community?
It's important for boxing and the community, and that's key. Ask yourself the question, what would a lot of these be doing otherwise? I don't actually subscribe to the view that everyone in here would be in trouble, but you have to understand that it gives youngsters, particularly adventurous youngsters, a channel for their energy, and you have to say for their aggression. And that's what happened at my club. It happens at clubs up and down the country. And Eddie said in his speech earlier on that there might be a youngster in here that one day we say, do you remember that night at the Aspire? That young kid we saw in the ring has gone on to do this. Or they might, like me and you, they might find a life outside the ring, but within boxing. But you know what they'll get? Least of all, if they really knuckle down like I did, like many have done, they'll make friends for life, and they'll build a confidence that they can take into whatever branch of work they move into. And the dedication and the discipline that they learn from here will serve them well wherever they go, whatever they do.
Matchroom being involved in like saving gyms, what does that feel like to be part of that team that's involved in that? It's not just about putting on those big nights on a Saturday night abroad or in the UK. You're dealing with grassroots. You're helping to promote and support the gyms that really need it, the gyms that could essentially breed future champions.
And this is fostering that link.
Absolutely.
Because it's a link that is so strong. Like we're here in Sheffield, Dalton Smith, top of the bill at the weekend. He was in this gym. If you not this particular gym, but in a gym like this in Sheffield, if you'd gone into his gym 7 or 8 years ago and picked out and said, that kid's going to top the bill at Sheffield Arena, well, maybe 1 or 2 people would have chuckled at you. I mean, he was a very good youngster, so maybe not so. But there are so many stories of that journey, right from here at the grassroots all the way to the top. Floyd Mayweather began in a gym just like this. And if you go to his gym in Las Vegas, it's almost as if he's tried to recreate this. That's something that struck me when I first went to his gym, which opened in 2007, in the year that he fought Ricky Hatton. It's almost like he's tried to kind of recreate this vibe, you know, this kind of collectiveness, you know, it's really special.
We speak about it being really special, and that is boxing. There is a magic to it. There's almost like a, you know, I can speak quite passionately about myself because I go to the fights, I go to the gyms, There's a magic in this sport that doesn't really exist anywhere else. Your experience of that?
Yeah, and it's, to me, this is a sport that brings out the very best of most characters. Look, I understand in the professional side of the business that I work in, when it comes to press conferences, when it comes to interviews like this, you know, there might be a bit of ticket selling hype. But it's actually quite rare that once the fight is done and dusted, when the final bell is rung or whatever the outcome might be, it's actually quite rare that there's not an embrace at the end of it. And even if they would never go on to become friends, there's this respect that both have been through a very special experience, whether that's coming through training and winning or coming through and losing. But there's a very special bond built right here at times like this, at this age, all the way through. That kind of respect and that kind of regard for your opponent.
I do like that, and it's interesting that you've mentioned that, because we had Ishmael Davis and Troy Williamson sat at the table saying, we like each other, you know, we're both family men, we've got the same core values, we've sparred hundreds of rounds, but that needs to get put aside for our fight on Saturday night. We could have the same in here, fighters coming out here, ending up facing each other at the top table.
You might have the situation in here, as I had in my club, where you've got two youngsters coming through the same age and the same weight. And the club can't do anything about it. They can't pull one out of the championships and show favouritism and let one go through. So you have to let both of them go through. And so there is inevitably going to be some kind of friction. And that's where amateur coaches are, for me, are really, really special. And that's where they, I was going to say earn their money, but they don't get paid. But that's where they earn their reputation, is by just making sure that personality clash that could happen is managed in the right way, and that the boys still respect each other all the way through. And boy A wins, and you make sure that boy B goes back into the gym and works and works and works, so that the next time they meet, he's the one who's winning. And that, again, you build that kind of respect and that friendship and that regard for each other, you know.
It's interesting that you say that as well, because then you have the discipline aspect, the fact that it's literally like there's a switch that goes on when you get in the ring, fight, but when you step back out of the ring as a fighter, there's that camaraderie, there's that respect between the fighters that is built in gyms like this. The discipline itself of boxing, it's not just about beating each other up, it's about discipline, respect, resilience, the training, everything that goes into it.
It is, and I've actually worked with youngsters that were sent to us. When I was coaching, there was a government body attached to education in London. It was called ILEA, the Inner London Education Authority. And we would be sent youngsters referred to us who were having issues at school. They might have been suspended, it was said in our day, now it's excluded. And they were sent to us I mean, you know, we used to laugh to say that we're to fix them, but they would come into the gym, and even the most bullish youngster would find that it was intimidating. Boxing gyms, if you remember that the first time you ever walked into a boxing gym, they are intimidating places. And so we would work with some of those youngsters. And I do remember working with one, I'm not going to name him now, but one in particular who said to me about how he was being dismissed at school as a bully, and he was kind of starting to own up to that. And when he sparred in our club and got hit, he realised that there were so many people out there who were harder than him, who were more dedicated than him, and who were ready to punish him in the way that he was only too ready to punish those lesser people at school or wherever. And it just completely reshaped his thinking about how he dealt with people generally, you know. And that was somebody who just couldn't get it right within the school system. And that's not a knock on the school system. It's just there are certain youngsters who just cannot find their pathway in school. And I'm not saying that clubs like this are the answer to everything, but they are the answer to some things, no doubt about that.
As you know, Matchroom, Alex, recently went to Parliament because that's the high level that Matchroom is prepared to go to now, to really push funding back into the community. Yourself, as somebody that's experienced in boxing, somebody that understands it, what do you think that will mean now that actually Parliament are taking this seriously? It's not just us talking about it on YouTube. Houses of Parliament. This is levels.
Yeah, and I think that gives it a special kind of recognition. And I think it's long overdue, I might say. I remember there was kind of a surge about 15, maybe 20 years ago for boxing to be a part of the school curriculum, or at least the post-school curriculum. And from where I'm from, around South London, edge of South London and Kent, many schools took it up with ex-professional boxers going in there. And in most cases, it was non-contact boxing with the view that those youngsters who A, showed a bit of ability, or B, showed a great desire, would then be sent on to the local clubs. So in a sense, the schools became a feeder system. Yeah, a feeder system through to the clubs. So there was no violence as such at school level. But still then, I don't know how long it lasted, but I'm guessing 3-4 years, and it filtered away, and suddenly we got this kind of anti-boxing movement again about we can't have violence in schools, and it was completely misunderstood. And that is why, and that is how government ministers, parliamentarians who really know their way around these kind of issues, in the way that many of us don't, really know how to cut through red tape. That's where they could be so important in building that kind of base of boxing in schools. And if it is to be non-contact, so be it. And then the school down the road that has a kid who shows promise sends him here on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday night. And that way you build, or even the kids that do the non-contact boxing might just like the exercise, might just get fit. It might encourage them to take up tennis or football or whatever. But again, it's a feeder. It's a starting point, And that's why it's so important.
And I was about to say that it really is important, but it's nice to see that you're grabbing the ball by the horns. You're not just sitting back. You're not just like talking about it in meetings. You're actually going out there doing it. Every time you have a fight, you're in the community gyms. Every time Matchroom has a card, you go out to the community, you speak to the community. Eddie's just said there, everyone in the gym gets a ticket, and I'm going to have a competition. And those that do really well, you can go backstage. The incentive, the hope that boxing gives us.
Yep, and how close these youngsters might get to a Dalton Smith. And look, I'm not suggesting at the moment he's of the profile of a Premier League footballer. But to get backstage at a big fight like that, and then walk out and see 10,000 people in this arena. Imagine at this age, ever getting the chance to do that. I'd have dreamt, I did dream of that happening, never did, but what can happen to these youngsters, and what that might just start and ignite in them. And as we said, not necessarily to follow a life in boxing. It might be in any kind of sport. It might encourage them to want to be a singer, an actor, an entertainer of some kind. It might just convince them, I want to be under the bright lights. And if they were a problem kid, then it might just make them realise that there's a much better life out there.
We absolutely love it. Thank you so much for your time. You've been a brilliant first-time guest. I'll leave you to mingle with the future stars of tomorrow.
People say I'm toxic, and honestly, I don't care.